MAXX Crosby, straight to Hall S. Hall. 5 Pro Bowls, and there's a real proposal on the table right now, sending Dayo Odeyingbo plus 2 draft picks to get this deal done. ESPN's already got eyes on it, and in a minute I'll break down why this move sets the real ceiling for Caleb Williams over the next 5 years, and why the package Ryan Poles is offering has me seriously worried. Because while we're out here chasing the pass rusher this defense has needed for years, that same ESPN buried us at 17 in their roster rankings, behind Green Bay and behind Detroit. You're going to hear the exact name Aaron Schatz called out as the guy to watch on that D-line, and why that ranking falls apart the second the Crosby trade gets done. And we're closing with something nobody in the Windy City saw coming. Jadan Baugh, a Florida running back, popping up in a 2027 mock draft to replace DeAndre Swift. I've got a take on Poles' plan there too, and why it might be a mistake. Bear down, fam. Let's get into it. I need to give you full context before we get hyped up, because this Crosby storyline already burned me once, and I don't want the same thing happening to you when somebody on social media starts screaming, this is already a done deal. How we got here. Back in March, the Ravens agreed to send 2 full first-round picks to the Raiders for Crosby. 2 first-rounders for 1 player. That tells you the level of talent we're talking about. And 4 days later, Baltimore walked away. The official reason was the knee, a surgery that ended his 2025 season early. 4 days? That's not a team that thought it through calmly. That's a team that panicked over something in the medical reports it didn't like. And what they did next confirms that read. Instead of pushing forward with Crosby, they went straight and signed Trey Hendrickson, a proven pass rusher without the recent medical uncertainty, without the collapsed trade drama attached. That cracked the market wide open. Seattle, Dallas, Detroit, all of them surfaced in the conversation at some point through March and April. Dallas already solved its need a different way, sending a 4th-rounder to Green Bay for Rashawn Gary, a cheaper player without the medical risk, and the speculation cooled off for a good stretch, close to 3 months of total silence on Crosby. On July 3rd, Austin Bundy of Fansided reignited the whole thing with 2 separate proposals, one for Philadelphia, one for us. And here's the one that matters. The Bears would send a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 third-rounder, and Dayo Odeyingbo. That's what Chicago would put on the table. Before anyone in the comments starts yelling, make the trade already, let's go to the numbers, because that's exactly where real analysis separates itself from empty hype. And that's exactly the kind of thing a locked-on panel would run through before saying anything at all, what Crosby actually brings to the scheme. In 2025, he played 935 defensive snaps, finished with a 79.7 PFF grade, generated 53 total pressures, 10 sacks, 31 hurries, 12 quarterback hits, 1 forced fumble, and 46 solo run stops. That's not a one-note specialist who only shows up on passing downs. That's a complete edge rusher who can set the edge against the run and still win on the pure rush. And at 29, he's still right in his physical prime, not on the back half of the curve. And here's something casual fans skip past. The Bears haven't had a truly elite edge-rushing duo since the Khalil Mack and Akiem Hicks era, and before that, since Julius Peppers. Pair Crosby with Montez Sweat, who broke the 10-sack barrier last year for the first time since Robert Quinn back in 2021, and you've got 2 players with proven double-digit sack ability on both edges of the line. That's not just adding one more good player. That forces any opposing offensive coordinator to rethink protection from scratch, because they can't just chip one side with a tight end or a back and trust the tackle to survive alone on the other. The real risk in putting Odeyingbo in the package. Now the uncomfortable part, and I'll say it straight because that's my job here. Odeyingbo in that package isn't a free giveaway, it's a calculated bet, and I want to flag a pattern with Ryan Poles that genuinely worries me. He came to Chicago last March from the Colts on a 3-year, $48 million deal. He played 8 games in 2025, finished with 1 sack, 21 tackles, 2 for a loss, and a torn Achilles that ended his year. His cap hit for 2026 sits at $20.5 million, 3rd highest on the whole defense. That contract already feels like a sunk cost for Poles, and honestly, this isn't the first time. Grady Jarrett also came in on a big free agency deal, and also turned into a cap headache. I'm starting to wonder, without trying to sound dramatic, whether there's a structural issue in how the Bears medical department is evaluating these guys before signing them, or whether we're just catching consecutive bad luck. Keep it a buck. 2 cases in a row doesn't feel like coincidence anymore. That said, if Las Vegas is willing to absorb that risk to extract real value from a Crosby trade, that benefits both sides. The Raiders land a first-round pick plus a real upside project. Someone who, if the Achilles heals right, still has the talent he flashed in Indianapolis, where he racked up 16.5 sacks over 4 years. And the Bears shed a deal they were probably cutting in 2027 anyway to save around $15 million. The math almost nobody explains properly. I want you to understand the full financial picture here, because this isn't a whim, it's straight front office math, And I'd be failing you as an analysis channel if I didn't lay it out clearly. The Bears enter 2026 with just $8.3 million in available cap space per over the cap. Extremely tight for a team supposedly in contention mode after winning the NFC North. But if Poles releases Sweat, Jarrett, Jackson, and Odeyingbo in the 2027 offseason, when those deals hit their final year, the team could free up as much as $63.5 million. Moving Odeyingbo right now, packaged into a trade that also brings in one of the league's best pass rushers, is exactly that two birds, one stone move a smart general manager chases. You're not losing a productive asset. You're turning a liability into an asset. And that distinction is what separates a GM who actually understands the cap from one who just collects players. But absorbing Crosby's deal isn't free either. If Chicago makes this trade, they're committing to an edge rusher on a $106.5 million contract, running through 2029 with cap hits climbing every year. That means a chunk of the space you'd free up cutting Odeyingbo, Jarrett, and company in 2027 gets eaten immediately absorbing Crosby. It's not extra money sitting free for something else. A big piece of it recycles straight back into the defensive payroll. It's a smart move if you genuinely believe Crosby gets you closer to a Super Bowl. It's a risky one if Crosby isn't healthy, or if this team isn't as close to contending as everybody assumes in July. The question almost nobody's asking: does our package even compete with Philadelphia's? Here's my sharpest opinion in this whole segment. When you compare what Philadelphia is offering, a 2028 first-round pick, a 2027 second-rounder, and linebacker Nolan Smith Jr., against what we're offering, a 2027 first, a 2028 third, and an injured Odeyingbo, I have to be honest, Philadelphia's package feels cleaner. Nolan Smith Jr. is a young player without a major injury history, while we're sending a defensive end coming off a torn Achilles. If I were John Spytek in Vegas, choosing between a healthy 24-year-old linebacker or a 26-year-old defensive end with a recent rupture, knowing Philadelphia also has a stronger immediate contention track record with Jalen Hurts still in his prime, the decision isn't as obviously in Chicago's favor as some fans want to believe. That means if we actually want to win this bidding war, Poles is probably going to have to sweeten the package. Maybe add another fourth-round pick, maybe swap that 2028 third for a second. Because right now, being objective about it, I'm not convinced our offer is the more attractive of the two sitting on Spytek's desk. Why Chicago and Philadelphia now, and not Seattle or Dallas? The names floating around after the Baltimore trade fell through. My read is simple. Seattle already made its big move elsewhere. Dallas already solved its edge need with Rashawn Gary. The market thinned itself out naturally, and the teams left with a real unresolved need are exactly Philadelphia, who lost Jalen Phillips in free agency and still has the Jalen Carter contract drama hanging over them, and us carrying the same structural problem for 3 years running now. No elite second rusher next to Sweat. My prediction, and I'm putting my name on this one, this doesn't get done in July or August. If it happens closer to the October trade deadline, and only under two conditions. Odeyingbo shows nothing through the opening weeks, which makes it easier to justify giving him up without regret. And Las Vegas starts without playoff rhythm and decides to sell before Crosby hits the expensive back half of his deal. If both hit, you'll see this trade in the news, probably with Chicago having sweetened the initial offer. If Odeyingbo surprises everybody and plays healthy, this cools right back down, same as it did in March with Baltimore. Look, I could be wrong. It's July, and there's a ton of football left before we know if Odeyingbo bounces back. But what you can't tell me is that this is empty noise. The need pattern is real, the money mostly works, and Poles already showed with Thuney and Jackson that his hand doesn't shake when it comes to moving big pieces once the fit lines up. The one thing that still gives me honest doubts is whether our current package is enough to beat Philadelphia's bid. Watch how this connects directly to what you just heard, because it's not a coincidence, fam. ESPN put out its rankings of all 32 rosters for 2026, done by Mike Clay, Aaron Schatz, and Seth Walder, and they slotted us at number 17, below Green Bay at 10. Below Detroit at 6. What ESPN actually gets right. I'm going to be the fan who analyzes this instead of the one who just screams outraged, because that's what separates this channel from a reaction account with no substance. Are they right about something? Yeah, pretty much. The defensive line is, without question, the biggest problem on this roster. Mike Clay said it straight up. The defense finished 2025, ranked 31st out of 32 in pass, rush win rate just 28.8%, and 26th in run stop win rate. Those numbers don't lie, and there's no way to spin them into looking good. Aaron Schatz went even sharper, naming Odeyingbo the most important non-starter to watch this year, asking flat out if he can get his groove back after the Achilles. And he added something worth hearing clearly: the Bears need edge help behind Sweat and Booker. There's the direct connection to the story we just broke down. The same problem dragging us down in this ranking is exactly the problem a Crosby trade solves in one move. It's not a coincidence that the two biggest stories of the week both circle the same hole. Why the hole runs deeper than people think. Booker enters year 3 having never played a full healthy season. Shamar Turner, the 2025 second-round pick, they're permanently kicking out to defensive end this year. Played 75 snaps across 5 games, 0 starts, before a torn ACL cut his year short. When ESPN says the defensive line is uncertain, they're not exaggerating. They're accurately describing a group that needs 2 young injury-prone players to make the leap at the exact same time in the exact same season, with basically no margin for error, because behind them on the depth chart, there isn't much beyond names, without real snap experience. And that leads to a question almost nobody in the Chicago beat reporter scene is asking: why didn't Ryan Poles attack this position more aggressively in free agency this year? We signed Odeyingbo over a year ago, and since then the plan B has basically been waiting for Booker and Turner to mature. That's not a plan, that's a passive bet. If we truly identify pass rush as the number one problem on this roster, we should have seen more movement back in March, not be relying on a speculative October trade to fix it. Why the ranking itself feels soft. But here's where my opinion completely splits from ESPN's, and I'll say it with full confidence. The ranking itself feels soft once you compare it against our direct division rivals. Green Bay at 10 lost receivers, Dontavian Wicks and Romeo Doubs this offseason, and on top of that, shipped Rashawn Gary off to the Cowboys. Their best player, Micah Parsons, isn't even expected back until October or November because of injury. Sit with that for a second. You're ranking a team ahead of us, knowing for a fact that their best defensive player is going to miss nearly half the season. How do you justify that? A roster ranking should reflect who's actually better playing real football, not who's writing a recent success narrative. Detroit at 6 released left tackle Taylor Decker and is rebuilding a line that was elite just last year. They've got the best offensive group in the division. I won't argue that. Jahmyr Gibbs and company are terrifying. But saying their whole roster is 7 spots better than ours after we won the division last year feels like lazy analysis stuck on the old narrative that the Bears are always a year behind their rivals, regardless of what actually happens on the field. What we actually have that ESPN is underselling. Because look at what we actually have. The offensive line, by ESPN's own admission, is the best part of this team. Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, and Romo Duns are, in the analysis's own words, ready for breakout seasons. The secondary can take a real jump if Kyler Gordon and Jalen Johnson are both healthy for week 1. That's not a number 17 roster. That's a top 10 roster with one missing piece, and that piece is exactly what the Crosby conversation is trying to solve. My final point, and I mean this seriously, not just for clicks. ESPN isn't inventing the problem, they're being honest about the pass rush. What's unfair is not weighing that this is literally the one real hole in an otherwise contention caliber roster. A team doesn't fall 7 spots below rivals with their own serious problems, just because of one weak position group. And if Poles closes something close to the Crosby deal, this ranking is going to look ridiculous within weeks. Save this clip so you can throw it back at ESPN when it happens. To wrap things up, something lighter, but where I've also got a critical opinion I want to share without holding back. DeAndre Swift enters the final year of his contract with an $8.8 million cap hit for 2026, and if Kyle Monaghan repeats the kind of season he had in 2025, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Chicago lets Swift walk in 2027 free agency to save the money. That's a business decision that makes sense on paper. Justin Mello of NFL Draft. On SI, put out a 2027 mock draft this week with the Bears taking Florida running back Jadan Baugh in the first round. And I want you to understand why that name isn't random. Ben Johnson built one of the league's best running back duos in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, and that instinct for valuing the ground game through 2 complementary styles doesn't disappear just because he's in Chicago now. Baugh's numbers are legitimate. He jumped from 133 carries in 2024 to 220 in 2025, finishing with 1,170 yards, 5.3 per carry, and 8 touchdowns. In the passing game, he added 33 catches for 210 yards and 2 more scores. Physically, he stands 6'1" and weighs 231 pounds, with the strength to squat over 560 pounds. But he also clocked a top speed of 21.7 miles per hour, which, for a back his size, is a rare combination of power and burst. My real criticism of this mock draft, and it's not about the player. Here's my problem, and it has nothing to do with whether Baugh is good, because clearly he is. My problem is resource allocation. If in 2027 we're still dealing with the same defensive line hole we're discussing today, spending a first-round pick on a running back, no matter how talented, when Monaghan already exists on the roster with a similar style, feels like a textbook misuse of draft capital. Running back is, without question, the most replaceable position in modern football. You find similar production in round 3, round 4, even in free agency, constantly. Spending a first rounder there, when we'll probably still need edge rushers, cornerbacks, or offensive line depth, is exactly the kind of decision that makes me question a front office's discipline. Even though this is just a speculative mock draft from an outside analyst, and not an actual polls decision, and there's something else nobody's mentioning. Baugh and Manangai run fairly similar styles, both physical downhill backs who win between the tackles. If Chicago genuinely wants to diversify the backfield after Swift, they need a real change of pace option. Someone with lateral burst or a more complete receiving skill set, not a younger second copy of a player we already have. That's a call Poles and Johnson have to make over the next 12 months, and there's a lot of football, a lot of injuries, and a lot of scouting left before that decision becomes real. There you go, fam. 3 stories, one connecting thread, and I want you to walk away with this. This Bears roster is one piece away from feeling genuinely dangerous. And that piece lives on the defensive line, not the backfield, not the third receiver. If Poles closes something close to the Crosby deal in October and sweetens what's currently being discussed, forget ESPN's number 17, this defense gets completely rebuilt. And if it doesn't happen, we're right where we are now, an elite offense paired with a defense that needs Odeyingbo and Booker to grow up fast with zero margin for error. Bear down. If this helped you out, drop the like, subscribe, and tell me down below. Would you make the Odeyingbo plus picks trade for Crosby exactly as it's laid out right now? Or do you think Poles needs to sweeten the offer before Philadelphia locks him up? I'm reading every single one. See you in the next one.